Hello and welcome to The Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan. The evacuation of Indian nationals from Port Sudan is continuing. At the last reports, we have over 500 who've been removed to Saudi Arabia. So that appears to be going well. They are taking advantage of a 3-day ceasefire between the warring groups, the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Force, a paramilitary group. So that ceasefire, I believe, ends perhaps tomorrow or sometime little day after, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. How does an evacuation of this sort happen? We have with us Vice Admiral Anup Singh, a former Eastern Navy commander. He was involved with Operation Sukoon in 2006 when Indians were evacuated from war-torn Lebanon. Sir, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Surya. Thank you for having me on the show.
Glad to have you, sir. So, first, let's get your sense of the Sudanese evacuation and how it's going. What's your sense? Where do you think it's? You think it's proceeding well? What's your sense?
The good part of the scenario there is that most of the fighting forces, the government forces and the RSF, is taking place far away from Port Sudan. That's in Khartoum, one part of Khartoum in particular. And therefore, it is safe for warships of other countries like ours to land up in Port Sudan and pick up our evacuees. Secondly, the ceasefire this time, announced for 3 days, out of which one is already passed, seems to be holding and seems to be honored by the RSF. And that is a very good sign because that will allow more evacuees to come from the capital and areas beyond.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, given the fact that the ceasefire is only for about 3 days, it's what I'm given to understand. I would presume that after that it'll again be difficult, or can we still manage something given the fact that we do have links at the higher levels of the Sudanese establishment?
Yes, everything in all these evacuations, non-combatant evacuations as they are called, hinges upon relations, bilateral relations. And fortunately for us, we've had very good relations with all the countries around except our two adversaries, our two neighbors. Now, that permits you to obtain diplomatic clearances very quickly for warships or aircraft to visit them. It is much safer for warships and much more efficient for warships to go in because they can stay there. They have longer endurance. They can do shuttle services frequently to Jeddah, for example, as is planned. And even if the ceasefire ends a day and a half from now, Port Sudan till now has been relatively peaceful. We are hoping that no untoward incident takes place around Port Sudan. In any case, the ships have their own security forces, only for self-defense and for protecting in a limited fashion the evacuees who have assembled there to embark them.
So I'd like to know the nuts and bolts of an operation of this kind. Does it require a very centralized form of control to coordinate between agencies and people in different locations? How does it work?
Navies are a little different from armies and air forces around the world. First of all, the characteristics of a warship include many properties like flexibility, mobility, versatility, endurance, and force projection, which means they act on their own far away from parent countries' shores. However, centralized coordination is first done by Naval Headquarters at Delhi in consultation with the Ministry of External Affairs, who in turn makes the plans for the two missions. In this case, Khartoum, the Indian mission in Khartoum, and the Indian mission in Saudi Arabia. After these initial plans are made from Delhi, thereafter a Navy also thrives in of authority to the commanding officer. So the ship's commanding officer thereafter makes all signals for passing information as well as proposals and plans and what it intends to do. So it is not really centralized after the initial plans are made. Thereafter, it is left to the task group commander or the fleet commander if there are a large number of ships, as happened in Lebanon, or to the commanding officer if it is a single ship, or if there are two ships together, then the senior of the two.
Now, I'm just a little intrigued. The gap between the actual deployment of a vessel from the time when instructions are given to send it appears to be very small. I mean, obviously, the ships are at sea, but are they equipped for events of this kind?
Oh, yes. And that is firstly thanks to many operations that have been done since the early 90s. The first such operation actually was a twin operation that was done by the Western Fleet with the fleet commander embarked in end 1994 when there was a problem in Somalia. And why I call it twin is because simultaneously one group of ships was sent by the fleet commander to Kisamayu, that port in Somalia, and the other one to Mogadishu. And the idea was to evacuate our land troops, the peacekeeping force generally of the Indian Army, which was there in these two places. They had to be evacuated when trouble went beyond limits for anyone in that country to control. And therefore, weapons, hardware, and troops had to be evacuated. But thereafter, the most major evacuation that we have done till now is Operation Sukoon in July of 2006. Insofar as the standard operating procedures, etc., are concerned, we are most fortunate between these two events that even though it was a tragedy of sorts in Asia, the Asian tsunami that struck most parts of this part of the world, and particularly in the Andamans, Sri Lanka, the east coast of India, and even the Maldives, and even a part of the west coast of India and Kerala. But it was really devastating. That taught us very major lessons. Since 1994, we had already started equipping ships whenever they sailed out, whether for home waters or for our shores, with certain types of material and food which could be distributed in crises or particularly in disasters like natural disasters like earthquakes, cyclones, etc. After the tsunami, the Navy formulated a standard operating procedure that depending on the size of a warship, a certain number of packages, which are now called bricks, are loaded on the ship. It is a must-have all the time. They are not loaded just before the order is given to sail, but all the time when the ship is in its operational cycle, these bricks have to be maintained. These include meals ready to eat. These include certain types of clothing to be distributed to evacuees. These also include rations of, which have to be properly cooked. And these include tents and blankets and all kinds of other things. So
yeah. When we talk of mission deployment, is that what is this what this is about?
No. Starting in sometime in 2007, the Navy had started deploying, even though we are still far short of our planned number of forces. We are far short of the desire, the not just desirable, must have numbers in so far as the order of battle is concerned for the Indian Navy. We are just about 135 or 136 ships now, as against a planned um, a planned figure of 140, which was planned sometime in 1963. But despite all this, in 2017, we decided to put a couple of ships in various parts of the Indian Ocean. And there are 7 such spots where these ships are all the time, not round the clock, not 24 by, not for all 12 months, but in staggered durations, sent out for deployments to cater to look after contingencies of this sort and to protect Indian shipping should there be a problem. For example, in the Persian Gulf, there were tanker wars in 2017 and 18. They were there much earlier also. So in the Persian Gulf, we used to have 2 ships at that time. Now, once in a while, we do send 1 or 2. The anti-piracy patrols, which started in 2008 in the Gulf of Aden, are continuing till this day. All the time. Around the year, we have at least 1 frigate or an offshore patrol vessel or a destroyer. Somewhere in the southwest Indian Ocean, close to the central Indian Ocean, which is between Maldives and Sri Lanka, we have 1 ship. The southwest Indian, which is beyond the equator, we have 1 ship. And at the mouths of the Malacca, Sunda, and Lombok Straits, we normally used to have 1 ship since 2017. Similarly, in the Bay of Bengal. So these 7 locations, in staggered manner, we put these ships, which are said to be mission-based, deployed for missions. That means mission-based deployments. So it is one of those, Sumedha, which was diverted from that mission-based deployment very close by to this place. And thereafter, Teg has also landed up there.
Mm-hmm. Now, the airspace over Sudan, I understand, is open for now because is closed. Although 2 C-130s landed at Port Sudan. So I presume things are safe enough at this point because of the truce.
Yes. As I said, most of the trouble is around Khartoum, particularly in the northern part. And wherever there are headquarters of the government and the military, which was part of the governing body. Therefore, most of the trouble is over there and in their units, the army's units, wherever they are. Fortunately for us, this problem is insignificant right now in Port Sudan, and that is how ships have been able to land there and aircraft have been able to land there.
But there would be a problem for Indians living in other parts of Sudan, like you mentioned, the north, to come all the way down to Port Sudan, wouldn't they?
Yes. Also, because Khartoum to Port Sudan is quite a long haul, and even if the country was peaceful at the moment, it would take almost a day, a little more by road. But that part of coordination is left to the mission, to the Indian embassy, which itself must be finding it difficult to keep the offices open, but they are being very brave, and Indian missions in all kinds of crises have really worked very well in these spots, including in Beirut, where there was no power, no water, no food for days on end when the fleet went there.
You mentioned sometime in the beginning about using weapons in self-defense, So in a war zone like this, do you recall any instance where the Navy had to retaliate because they were fired upon, or the lives of civilians were in danger?
Not really. Fortunately, it hasn't happened. And that is also because a lot of precautions are taken. But at the same time, one cannot take the host government's word for granted. For example, in Beirut, in fact, everything was shut down. There was neither power, nor water, nor life visible in the harbor. So when the first ship, the flagship Mumbai, INS Mumbai, entered Port Beirut on the morning of 20th of July, 2006, there was not a soul to be seen in the port. Till the ship was very close to the jetty when some troops of the Lebanese army landed up for securing the jetty, and that was because our mission was in touch with the local government. But one had to take no chances, and we had coordinated with the local government through the Ministry of External Affairs and through our mission, as well as with the defense advisor in Tel Aviv, because they were the ones who were, Israel was the ones, the Israeli Defense Forces were carrying out assaults 24/7 through their F-16 aircraft and through their ships on even the port. The lighthouse of the port had already got completely destroyed by the time, including the port control tower, by the time we entered harbor. That had happened about 2 days before we arrived. And F-16 bombardments in South Lebanon were happening as we were entering or leaving or in port. On one occasion, in fact, the bomb must have fallen so close to the port, southern part of the port, that the shudder and the and the ripple effect and the sound boom went through the water and even got transmitted to the hull of one of the frigates, INS Brahmaputra, while the ship was leaving harbor after taking evacuees on board. And it was quite a deafening sound. But for all this, on each such occasion, all weapons are ordered to be ready for action and fully manned for self-defense. Should there be a mistaken identity because of which an air assault takes place, or even a land projectile, land forces projectile, get through mistaken identity land towards the ship, in which case defense weapons are in frigates which have got Shilka type of gun, air guns including very high-speed missiles, that is anti-aircraft and anti-missile missiles, wherever ships are fought. INS Sumeda does not have missiles. It is an advanced offshore patrol vessel, but it has got other weapons. And the other thing in self-defense that is always done is certain troops who are always qualified and embarked on ships, certain gunnery ratings, gunnery men, as very fine shooters for self-defense and for protecting evacuees, whether they are Indian evacuees or foreign evacuees. Many a time we have taken foreign evacuees as well. For example, in Operation Sukoon, apart from Indians, we embarked Sri Lankans, Nepalese, a couple of Lebanese citizens, and a couple of American citizens.
So do you carry Marcos on board or anybody drawn from the army?
No, not from the army. We have our own Marcos. There is always part of the crew on frigates and destroyers has these specialized personnel.
So last question. Some time ago, there was a recommendation for a dedicated force to be sent in the event of such crises, happening. What happened to that? Is that a feasible thing? Is it practical?
No, the proposal was not for a dedicated force only for such contingencies, because that is unaffordable. Even for the United States of America to have a dedicated force only for peacetime contingencies of this nature would be an outstretch of out of the treasury. What has been recommended a long time ago by us is a modern expeditionary force, like the United States has, like the French Navy has. For example, Operation Desert Shield was majorly carried out by expeditionary forces, including ships of the nature of USS Boxer, which is like it's a 50,000-ton aircraft carrier. It carries jet fighters manned by the Marines, as well as Chinook helicopters and certain surveillance aircraft. Now, we don't want such a large carrier as an expeditionary platform, because we'll run out of 10 years of budget if we buy one. Nor do we require such a huge expeditionary force. But what we require are modern amphibious aircraft, which are not truly amphibious.
Mm-hmm.
They do standoff landing, which means they keep far away from the shore, and they do they send out troops on a beach or on the shore while staying far away with the help of A, hovercraft, B, more efficiently after the area has been sanitized by other forces of the Navy, sanitized off to get rid of enemy fire, with the help of air platforms, that means rotary wing, helicopters, etc., which carry the troops. So those ships are ideally suited. They are, for example, the LHD, landing helicopter dock, or large LPDs. We have asked for LPDs, landing platform dock. Now, those ships in their docks carry what we call in layperson's language hovercraft, which are air displacement vessels. And those can carry a large number of troops and go at very high speed, 45 knots and 42 knots, etc. But the other thing is that they can in their hangars vehicles required, including armored vehicles, which have to be landed ashore. And these armored vehicles now in modern expeditionary platforms are carried by those hovercraft. So we have been asking for these kinds of ships since 2006 and 2007. They haven't come as yet, even though initially plans were made to get them indigenously constructed, which will ultimately happen only indigenously. But they require A, budgetary allocation, B, certain collaboration for the initial construction, for design.
So I know it's still a little premature, but what would you say are the broad lessons from Sudan?
The broad lessons,
it's an ongoing
firstly,
operation.
are yes. The first thing, the broad lessons from Sudan would be that it's been a good augury that mission-based deployments have been implemented since 2017. Even though we haven't got the number of ships that we deserve. However, this has been enabled only because of modernization of the Navy, which took place over the last 15 odd years, 15 to 20 years. There's a large number of ships which have replaced legacy platforms of the Soviet era. And therefore, mission-based deployments is the answer, so that it is as good as when you are required, and not 4,000 miles away, and not 2,500 miles away. I mean, Port Sudan is about 2,400 nautical miles from Mumbai, the nearest Indian port from the Indian naval base. So mission-based deployments is the answer. Second thing is that we need these expeditionary platforms. The faster, the better. The sooner, the better. Because they are so versatile that and so flexible that role change can happen while the ship is sailing. And that's another characteristic.
Very interesting. On that note, Admiral Anup Singh, we'd like to close this program. Thank you very much, sir, for that perspective. And let's see where the Indian Navy is again called next time some emergency happens somewhere. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and other social media. Thank you and good night.